We are starting a restorative class. I'm just going to move my camera a little bit. I do have my overhead light off today, and it looks like you guys have enough light on me. So we're going to do some brain quieting poses. We will do some pranayama as well. And if you have a bolster, it's going to be quite useful today. If you don't have a bolster, we can improvise with blankets and blocks. So go ahead and find your dominant cross-legged position and just take some time to adjust so that you feel very even, not only front to back, but side to side. Taking some time to adjust your shoulders, to help your chest lift and spread, to try to find a sense of evenness to the torso. Sometimes when we sit up tall, we end up pushing the abdomen forward. So just taking care of finding a little more evenness to the front and back body. And then as you're ready, joining your hands together in front of your heart and just taking a moment to point your gaze down without tilting your chin down. And moving attention down to the parts of your body that are meeting either the floor or your props. And inviting a little more surrender there so we can sense we continue on rather than feeling like we're stopping where the floor begins. Bringing some awareness to your abdomen. If you find that there's little movement or no movement, see if you can bring a sense of softening to the abdomen, and maybe some movement will start to come with the breath. Relaxing your jaw, your tongue, the skin of your face. Giving yourself enough time here that the brain can start to latch on to each and every breath. The eternal waves of your breath. And as you're ready, bowing towards your own heart, releasing your hands. And as you're ready, lifting your head, letting your eyes gently come open. And welcome. And we're going to start in a supported child's pose. So if you do have a bolster, that's probably the easiest way to support yourself. Otherwise, you can roll 1 or 2 blankets. So 2 obviously would be thicker. We're going to put it in front of us. You can also support underneath your shins, between your buttocks and your heels. Just bringing enough support to the front body, this chest and abdomen, and you're going to rest your cheek simply because we need to free the space for the breath. So we don't want to press the face into the bolster. We want to be able to breathe. So we'll spend about a minute with this cheek resting, and then we'll take a turn with the other cheek resting. Just let your arms be passive here. If you want to fully extend them, you can, but otherwise elbows bent, making sure the shoulders are releasing. And again, just trying to find your roots in every pose today, starting with the parts of you that connect with the floor. And just signaling these areas to surrender, to release, to imagine little roots growing down into the earth. A gentle tugging on your spine with every breath, which you might sense some resistance to. Just notice that. And as you hold the pose, maybe the spine will start to release and extend a bit more. And feeling the pressure of your bolster to the front body, gently pressing the breath into the back body. Bringing some awareness to your hips, softening into the hip joints. And just go ahead and move to the other cheek, resting on your bolster. If the shoulders are any amount active, try to widen your elbows so the shoulders can fully surrender. In this week of our practice, we can really let go of any striving that might show up in other weeks of our practice. You'll start to move out of the child's pose now. So go ahead and bring yourself up. We'll come into a bolster supported side twist. So just for our intents and purposes, whatever you're using, we'll just call it a bolster. So we're going to place the bolster can stay where it is. You're just going to move to your left hip being against that bolster end. And then using your hands on the floor to help you gently start to turn toward the bolster. Your legs can kind of be passively floating off to the right side, knees are bent. Getting as much of a twist as you can, kind of in an upright torso position. And then begin to lengthen down, resting your front body. And attempting to take your right cheek to the bolster for a complete twist. And if that's not yet available in your body, then you might place the left cheek for now. Sometimes we need to elevate the bolster, either putting something underneath the bolster or on top of it. So if you're finding that the landing pad is a little bit of a reach, you can place some sort of prop there to meet your cheek. Every time you inhale, there's that gentle tugging on the spine, lengthening. And every time you exhale, there's a deeper, juicier twist. Letting your legs be fully surrendered in a nice, heavy, passive way. A couple more breaths. Use an inhalation to help you press your hands down, to help you bring the torso up. And you're just going to turn your bolster 90 degrees so that you're working with it horizontally. And we'll do a side lying, kind of a crescent shape for the spine, using this bolster to the left rib cage area. So you're going to attempt to kind of just place the side ribs over the bolster. Also attempting to not have the bolster under the armpit region. So you're really kind of addressing the rib cage mostly. You can rest your head on your bottom arm, your left arm. You might keep your right hand on your hip for a few moments. And then you might eventually take the right hand to meet the left, kind of a side-lying crescent position here. So if you feel wobbly, feel free to bend your knees. Otherwise, working with straighter legs, they don't have to be actively straight, but just kind of stacked one on top of the other. And once you've kind of come into this shape, you can start to just surrender all effort, letting the props, the shape itself, the breath kind of take over, creating space in your body. Maybe visualizing your spine here, that soft kind of hill shape that it's taking. Maybe imagining your right intercostals becoming more elastic with every in-breath. Maybe noticing some resistance, and eventually maybe the resistance starting to release. So watch yourself and how you relate to restorative practice. For some of us, we can get dull and sleepy and the mind wanders. For others, we just kind of compulsively tend to strive. And again, the mind will wander. So just observing how you show up here in relationship to this practice. We're going to transition to a supported Sphinx pose. So you can stay kind of with the bolster working the way it is, but you're going to roll on top of it so that your belly a little bit, some of the chest is elevated, but your hips and your pubic bone should be on the floor. And your arms should be right kind of elbows underneath shoulders. And just start with your palms up and press the arms against the bolster to kind of help you move your chest forward. Angling the tailbone toward the floor. And now we'll make it a little more passive. Make sure you're centered up on your legs. We'll make it a little more passive, sliding the elbows forward, taking the hands to prayer pose, and taking the forehead to the thumbs. And just a little bit of maintaining the effort of tilting the pelvis back, of taking the tailbone to the floor to lengthen the lumbar. But let everything else just kind of soften. Observing the breath. Still feeling the breath being invited into the back body with the pressure to the front body. The nervous system quieter with the forehead support. Try to soften your buttocks. Soften your jaw. And 3 more breaths. You're going to start to move your hands away from the head. You can use your hands against the floor to help you gently roll back to either side. And we're going to come up just so that we can transition to take our twist. Now with the bolster to the right hip side and the legs off to the left, knees bent. Once you've set that up, you can use your hands to help you turn the torso in an upright position as well as you can toward that bolster. And once you're kind of right there with the deepest twist you're going to get here, start to spread the length of the front body down over the bolster, attempting to land now your left cheek, if not your right cheek, maybe adding some height underneath it. take care of your shoulders, which might mean you have to bend elbows, widen elbows. So shoulders can just surrender. Observing the breath filling and emptying from the body. Staying for at least 5 more breaths. Letting an inhale start to lead you out of this supported twist. You can take your hands to the floor and just kind of rise up in a spacious way on an in-breath and turn your bolster sideways. We're going to try to land those right side ribs on the bolster. We'll unfold the right arm so that the palm is up, the arm is resting on the floor. Your legs can be stacked, either bent knees or straighter. Resting your head against your right arm. Sensing into that, and then as you're ready, taking the left arm to meet the right arm. Getting the hands to come together. And observing from here how the breath opens the left side body. How the bolster creates the crescent shape of the spine. Maintaining just a little effort to remain on the outer right hip side. Feeling that spacious, airy, open left armpit. We'll gently start to transition onto the front body again for one more Sphinx pose. Just taking a moment to separate the feet just slightly wider than your hips. To lift the inner thighs up and the outer thighs can roll down, centering the front thighs. And then again, placing your head against your hands. Go ahead and extend the arms, and we'll find our way to coming up to our hands and knees just for a moment. We're going to transition into reclining bound angle, but we're going to do it a little differently than we normally do. We're going to try to work with 2 horizontal bolsters. So that might mean you're rolling 2 blankets. It might mean you're working with 1 bolster and 1 rolled blanket. I'm not sure anybody has 2 bolsters, but you could also do that. And so you can go ahead and just kind of get those 2 bolsters set up. And they should be kind of the same size. So even though I have one bolster, I'm going to roll 2 blankets so that I have 2 kind of similar sizes. If you had 2 blankets and a bolster, you could roll the 2 blankets together and probably have very similar sizes. And then we're going to work with the strap and to bind the legs for that bound angle shape. If you have tightness in your hips, feel free to tuck your blocks, or if you have a lot more blankets, you could use those too, underneath your knees, thighs, or hips, wherever is the best kind of support for you. And we'll take the strap and create a tight loop. You can start to just set that up. And once you have your loop, just pass it over your head and down to your hips. And then sliding the loop underneath the toes. Try to keep that strap lower, don't let it ride up. Definitely don't want it kind of on the kidneys or anywhere as close to your kind of your hips as you can keep it. And you'll tighten off any excessive strap that you don't need. We're attempting to put the first bolster kind of right behind the sternum. So not the lumbar. We want to have the buttocks kind of pulled away from the upper body. Your head should be supported in a way that your chin is at least level with your forehead. What we don't want is your chin poking up and your forehead tilting down. If anything, have your chin tilting down and your forehead higher. And then you'll unfold your arms. Be on the backs of your hands and have your arms away from your torso enough that your armpits are open and aerating. Make sure you have the support you need for your hips. If there's anything nagging at you, make sure to take care of it so that we can really attempt to feel that whole body awareness. That's a marker of a really balanced pose. And playing with a little bit of imagery with your breathing. Inhaling. Sorry, I think I have a cat with a hairball in the background. Hopefully it'll pass soon. But thinking about your breath rising, but when it nears the chest area, spreading. So the image I like to use is kind of the fountainhead idea of that kind of rising energy, but then the spreading across the chest to the outer ribs, filling your lungs in an outward expansive way. And you can watch the breath descend in a similar way. I use actually a different image that might be helpful to you, but if you've ever used funnel in the kitchen or anywhere, just kind of imagining the breath leaving the body in kind of a funnel pattern, kind of moving from a wider to a narrower descending pattern. So if the images aren't useful to you, you can just kind of find your own, or just imagine the breath rising and spreading and then narrowing and descending. Baddha Konasana is just a wonderful pose to start to really key in on the breath. And I don't want you to be in any sort of pranayamic state here, no restraint on the breath, no effort, just an observation. When you're ready, you just start to loosen the feet out of the belt. Sometimes it's easier to loosen the belt. Really has to be kind of an intuitive exit, whatever's going to work best for you. Remembering that our duty today is really to try to keep the brain out of agitation, out of disruption. So just doing whatever you need to keep yourself quiet. And once you have the feet released, you're going to take your feet wide, drop the knees in. You can rest your hands on your belly or your chest. Just taking a few moments to find more equanimity in the hips and groins. And then you'll gently ease over to one side. We are going to come back to our backs. So once you have eased over to your side, you can come up and just start to put your strap off to the side. You can put your blanket that was supporting you behind your rib cage. That one can go out of the way. And then if you're going to use a head blanket, it's better to work with something flat than rounded. So you might unroll your blanket and fold it to have adequate head support. And then you can come back to your back. We'll do some work with our hips here today. Just starting with a very mild figure 4. So once you're on your back, take a moment to lift your hips and just imagine you're lengthening the spine out. You're trying to place your butt as far away from your shoulders as you can. Think about the flesh of your buttocks moving from upper buttock to lower buttock. And then we will take our right ankle and place it to the left thigh. Extend your right hand and just have a little pressure to either your inner right thigh or inner right knee. And every time you exhale, you're just going to push that thigh or knee away from you. And every time you inhale, you're going to release that pressure. Keep your chin tilting toward your chest. You might notice with the in-breaths when you're releasing the pressure, you're not completely releasing the pressure. Might not be a full release, but do release some. And try to linger in the exhale. If this is a good position for you, feel free to stay here. If you'd like to have a little bit more sensation, you're going to lift your left foot and you can grab your left thigh from behind or your left shin from front with your hands clasping. You may want to continue using now your elbow against your inner right knee to add that pressure. But each time you're exhaling, you're actually squeezing your left thigh toward your body and tilting your chin down. Every time you inhale, just releasing the legs or backing off a little bit more so that we're kind of playing with re-entry here, dipping in and out of deeper sensation in the hip, which is a very good technique for releasing tight hips. Again, trying to just linger in the exhalations. Really going to the end of the exhale. If you're in the lifted left foot position, you can start to release now, the foot back down. What we're going to do now from figure 4 shape is we're going to let that right foot drop to the floor over to the left. Use your left hand to hold your right ankle to stabilize it there, to keep it there. Your right hand can just drape on top of your right side body. And then you're just going to do a little bit of a pressurization of the outer right knee away from the torso. If you sense it wants to fall in, you're just kind of resisting it out. And now if you'd like, you can extend your right arm directly out to the side, palm up, and roll your head toward the right. And now you might let your right knee move toward the floor rather than what you were just doing, away from the floor. So I've slid my hand now, my left hand, to the outer right knee, and I'm just kind of bringing some heaviness there. So you're more in a supine twist now. Now you're going to gently help yourself ease back over to your back body. Keep your legs crossed. We did this Monday if you were here. This is reclining Gomukhasana, cow pose. So ideally we have our knees kind of stacked, but for some of us, they're going to be a little more wider or open. You're going to attempt to find either your shins with your hands or your outer ankles. So you'll have your left hand to your right ankle or shin. You'll have your right hand to your left ankle or shin. And then as you kind of hold the ankles or shins tightly, firmly, again, resist your knees away from your torso. Don't let them fall into the torso. Resist them away from the torso. Tilt your chin down. Try to keep your shoulders heavy on the floor, not rounding off the floor. The back is long. Minimal gap between the low back and the floor. And with the knees resisting away from the torso, there's space for the breath. So just noticing next 5 breaths, breath filling and emptying. And when you come to the next exhalation, releasing slowly your grip on the ankles or shins, uncrossing the legs, just draw the legs in either from backs of the thighs or fronts of the shins, reclining child's pose. And as you're ready, you can place your feet one at a time. And again, take a moment to lift your hips off the floor and try to lengthen the spine and move the butt away from the head side. Place the butt so that you feel the flesh is descending. And then we'll take figure 4, left ankle to right thigh, starting with a grounded right foot. Extending your hand, pressing on the inner knee or thigh. And just every time you exhale, you're just adding a little pressure, sensing into that hip space, inquiring, releasing the pressure on the in-breaths. If there's a springing back quality, that's a tight hip, just be observant. And when you have enough information, you might decide to go into that lifted right foot position and thread the hands behind the thigh or over the shin. Maybe using the elbow to keep adding that little pressure every time you exhale. But we're really squeezing the legs toward us now on the exhalations, tilting the chin in as well toward the chest. Following exhalations to their very, I call it the vanishing point. Another 3 exhales. come through the end of the next exhalation. Rest the right foot if it is elevated. And we're going to just drop that left foot to the floor on the right. You're going to stabilize by holding onto your ankle or shin, whatever you can reach. Be passive with your right leg, let it land. Left hand to your side ribs for now. And then just resisting the knee away from the torso, even though it wants to fall in. You're resisting, you're kind of pressing toward the outer knee. A lot of times in restorative yoga, one of the definitions is putting good stress on the joints. Just holding yourself here. Putting nice good pressure on the ball and socket joint. And then you're going to let that resistance, you're going to just yield to it now. Let the knee fall in. You might slide your hand up to the outer knee now and use that to help you secure the legs over to the right side. You might unfold your left arm and let your head kind of follow and look down those left fingertips. Sometimes in restorative practice, I recall one of the definitions in Ayurvedic, the method of Ayurvedic science, of youthfulness is quality of gooiness. And when I practice restorative yoga, sometimes I feel like I'm recovering some of that gooiness inside the body, as opposed to a dryness, a brittleness. It just feels like everything becomes a little bit more lubricated and smooth. And now we're going to come back to our back bodies, but keep the legs crossed for that Gomukhasana, reclining Gomukhasana. So the knees are attempting to be more stacked, so toward midline. And then you find your ankles or shins, whatever you can reach. And you'll hug the ankles or shins close. You'll secure them. The shoulders should be able to sit down when you do. And then you'll press the knees, you'll resist the knees away. Don't let them drop toward you. Chin to chest. Feel how the belly space opens when we resist the knees away. Try to flatten the back against the floor. Don't let your back hyperextend. Don't let your belly poof. You might close your eyes. You might look toward the cheeks. Just a couple deep breaths. Go ahead and soften enough that you're able to uncross your legs. We'll hug the legs close for reclining child. Tilt the chin in. Try to feel or sense the spine in a single curve. And now the thighs pressurizing the front body again to just press the breath into the back body. And now you're going to let the knees fall open and let your arms come between the knees. If you're able to, use your first two fingers and thumbs to hook your big toes. If you have to modify that, you can grab with your hands, your ankles or your front shins. And then you're going to place your shins in a vertical way. You'll notice the knees want to really widen. You're doing a little bit of a clamping in to keep your knees not to their fullest width. And then what you're going to do is rock enough that you're able to touch each knee to the floor. So you're rocking very slowly and touching the knees to the floor. There's kind of a little bit of a hanging, either hanging from the big toes or hanging from the ankles. So you're kind of feeling some weight on the legs, some good pressure in the hip joints. You can also call it pulling. I like the word hanging. It's a little more passive than pulling for restorative practice. Just letting the weight of the arms hang on your feet, hang on your ankles, your shins. And now next time one of your knees touches down, you can keep yourself there to that side. And this is kind of we've done this pose once before. You're going to extend the opposing leg side, whatever knee is not on the floor. Extend that leg up. This is our kind of our bow and arrow archery pose. You're pulling down with the hand that is holding the big toe, the knee touching the floor. And you're reaching up through the extended leg side. And then you're going to go back to your gentle rocking a few more times until we land the other knee down. So just kind of go back to each knee, just kind of touching the floor, slowly massaging the width of the sacrum. And the next time you have that opposite side knee touching down, keep that. And then go ahead and just start to see about extending the other leg. It might not completely extend. Couple breaths. Go ahead and release that extended leg back to a softer knee. You're going to come back to your back body. And now extending both legs again, you're just going to hold it here. Your shins are stacked vertically. You're hanging from the big toes, shins or ankles. Tilt the chin toward the chest and just gently clamp the knees slightly in. Taking a few good breaths here. Go ahead and join the heels, release the big toes, ankles or shins, and then let your feet slowly return to the floor. Okay. Go ahead and roll to your side to come up. We're going to do a head supported Upavishta Konasana. So it's a seated pose. And I like to have the tailbone supported in this pose, but not the sitting bones, which means that kind of the ideal prop is the corner of a blanket rather than the edge. And that corner is just under the tip of your tailbone. And then the buttocks are just, you're going to lift and spread them. So you feel your sitting bones are coming down. Don't get too perfect because we need to set up our head support. So one of the quickest ways to create enough height for your head is, well, the simplest would be a chair. If you have that, you could use the edge of a chair seat to rest the head on. Otherwise, the bolster and a couple of blocks is a good one. And I like to play with the height of my block so that I can create this kind of inclined bolster. So that's another setup. Sometimes with this inclined bolster, I also add a blanket so that not only is my head a little bit closer to that surface, but I have some variation so that I can let my nose be free and clear. If I just put my head down on the bolster directly, then my nose gets kind of smashed into it. So always have to consider the breathing. So then once you have a setup that you've kind of tested and you know your head will be able to meet, then you just make sure you're on that very tippy edge of the blanket. Your legs are going to become nice and wide. And we all have to take care of our kind of our imbalances in our hips. So toes above heels, making sure your toes aren't turned out or turned in. And then you're going to come forward in a way that your back stays long. You can always rest your cheek if you're not finding a good way to have the nose free and clear. Just know that you'll want to rest the other cheek at about halfway through this pose. So we're going to hold the pose a couple minutes. I'll try to remind us when we're about halfway through. And shoulders should be restful. So I like to place the backs of my hands on the floor and truly have my shoulders feeling surrendered. The legs remain somewhat active here so that we don't just go into a ragdoll kind of dull, sleepy state. If you are resting your cheek, just make sure to switch to the opposite cheek at this point. Just a few more breaths here. When you're ready, you're going to inhale, just kind of sliding the hands on the floor, stacking your spine. Start to move your setup, kind of break it down. So the last pose we're going to do before we get into our pranayama is just a single bolster Situ Bandha Sarvangasana, so a bridge pose. A lot of times we do this cross bolsters, but today we're going to do just a single bolster running with the spine, so working with it vertically. So if you are working with blankets, it's a good idea to have, if you have 2 blankets, kind of a lot of bulk. Otherwise, the effect of the pose won't be quite enough to work. So you want to have either bolster or a couple blankets rolled. Sometimes I put just a flat blanket down where my head will go to make it a little less hard, because I have a wood floor, so it's a little bit kind of hard on the head, I guess. So it's not so much for height, it's just for the padding. And you're going to position yourself on the length of your bolster so that your shoulders are going to come down to the floor. So you want your chest to be lifted, but we don't want our shoulders floating. We want our shoulders meeting the floor. And your heels are going to separate slightly wider than your hips. You're going to try to put the soles of the feet in a vertical alignment, toes above heels. And then you'll be resting on the backs of your hands, taking a moment to kind of press the forearms down, to lift the shoulder blades up, to roll the outer upper arms down. The chin we want tilted toward the chest. So sometimes you need to put a little height under your head to encourage that tilting toward the chest. This is our Jalandhara Bandha that we use in pranayama, the chin to chest lock bandha. And then just a little bit of pressure into your heels to help you move the tailbone up toward the ceiling, to help you kind of flatten the lumbar and compress the front body down toward the floor, minus the chest, of course. And keeping your eyes pointed toward your cheeks. So there is some effort here, but try to remove any unnecessary hardness or rigidity, any effort that agitates the brain. And when you do a little bit of compression to the abdomen, it supports that fountainhead idea of the breath not only rising as high as the chest, but being able to expand across the chest, almost even wrapping to the armpit region. So it's not a hardening of the abdomen, it's just kind of containing the abdomen in a way that the breath has to move up and out. That's the funnel. You can picture the funnel or the fountainhead if those images help. Inverted triangle. And just let your legs become passive now. Let your hands move onto your belly or your chest. And begin to bend your knees. And then helping yourself carefully move to your side. We're going to do a seated pranayama today. We're going to do Brahmari, which is the bumblebee breathing. So it's best in seated pranayama to take kind of ample support. So whatever you use generally when we're seated and centering at the beginning of class, just double it, because we really want to have a feeling of descent to the thigh bones, a feeling of really ample support to the spine being erect, which is essential to pranayama. And the legs should be comfortable. So some people sit in full lotus pose, which for most of us is not comfortable. Swastikasana or Sukhasana, crossing your legs, is a good one. And if you need to modify for any reason, you want to do that so that you can feel very supported. So this, I'll just remind us, we've done this several times, but there is a mudra that goes with it, which is a hand position that is sort of like a mask to bring awareness to the sense organs being withdrawn. So the mask position is eventually the thumbs will plug the ears so that we can hear our bumblebee sound in our head, which is ultimately very quieting. The index fingers go along the brow line. The middle fingers seal the upper and lower eyelids, but not with pressure against the eyeballs. So just sealing lightly, kind of along the lash line. The ring fingers right outside the nostrils, and the pinkies represent the quieting around the mouth or the withdrawing of the mouth. So that's the mask. And then the elbows are lifted and spread, and obviously the armpits are in a very aerated, open position. If for some reason this makes you claustrophobic, for some people it does, you'll still use your thumbs to close your ears, but you can work with your head or your hands kind of working like a headband over the skull, kind of above over the crown of the head and placed there. So that's another good option. So you can let your hands relax for a moment, just a reminder of what we're going to be doing. Your tongue is kind of lifted and hovering in the mouth. So we're going to go ahead and just make a bumblebee sound. Bzzz. But you're going to now try it with your lips sealed. You shouldn't have to think about the placement of the tongue. We naturally have a placement that we hold the tongue in when we make that sound. So you're just you can imagine what your tongue is doing, but you're not trying to force any weird position on your tongue. So we're going to put that all together now. We are going to do it 3 times in a row with the full duration of each exhale. You're going to come back into another bumblebee sound 3 times total. And when you're done, you'll release your hand position, resting on the backs of the hands, and you'll just sit with the quietness that really is a result of this Brahmari. So when you're ready, we'll take the thumbs to the ears, we'll take the index to the brow line, middle fingers sealing the eyelids, ring fingers, the nostrils, pinky fingers, the mouth. Big inhale here, plug the ears. When you're ready, you can begin. Feel free to sit as long as you want, and when you're ready, you're going to transition to Shavasana. Make sure you have enough warmth, coverage over the eyes if you need it, head support. We'll just be resting in that continuation of this deeper silence that not only our practice has cultivated, but our Brahmari bumblebee breath. Live from moment to moment, absorbed in the unruffled flow of the circular movement of the in and out breaths. Its current should be like that of a very full, stately river whose movements cannot be seen. So as to not rush your Shavasana, I'm gonna leave the class here and I welcome you to stay as long as you would like. So namaste.